Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
This is our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it and give this video a like.
Yep, podcast below in the description. Get on it now.
So, Urban Meyer, who you and I both advocated for hiring, is off to a rough start, John. He has hired and fired his strength and conditioning coach very quickly. And it makes me wonder if Trevor Lawrence should wonder if going to Jacksonville is actually as stable as maybe we think Urban Meyer would make a program, or in this case, an NFL team. Would you be at all concerned? Are your antennas up at all if you're Trevor Lawrence, or is representation?
Yeah, I mean, watching highlights of the pro day, Urban Meyer was basically in the huddle, right next to the guy snapping it to him, standing right there with Dabo. So it was just, I do wonder in Trevor's, it's hard to call it a bubble, but I do think when you play in a huge program like that, you live in the bubble of that program, even when you are a super duper star as he is. Now he's signed. He's been working out with Carson Palmer's brother, Jordan, who had like a powwow on the beach. You follow Jordan Palmer on Instagram?
No.
And he had like this dude on like with dreads playing music, and like Josh Allen's there and Trevor Lawrence is there, for the guys that they get ready for the pro day, and Jordan led his pro day. So I just think you're just kind of in the mode. You think Urban Meyer is a high-level guy, right? Trevor Lawrence is from the South, played at Clemson. He's going to hear good things about him. I don't know if this in a vacuum does anything to Trevor Lawrence, like the strength coach. Honestly, I think it's meaningless. But I do think it reflects Urban a little bit of, did we talk about this last week? Maybe we did off the podcast, just of all the people you could hire. Now, in the NFL, unlike college, like if me and you, if I'm the head coach and, you're my AD or whatever, fucking UFC, you see it with Sark. If you're at a big program, you can hire people from other programs. Hell, you can just, Ohio State can hire a guy from Michigan, right? In the NFL, if I run the Cowboys, or let's just use Urban as an example, I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I want to hire a guy from Kyle Shanahan's staff, if that guy's under contract, I can't hire him. Whether I want to give him 10 times, the guy could be making $500,000, I'm offering him $5 million, it does not matter. Where in college, clearly from the pros, I can pick anyone in college. Now, we've seen recently, I remember first started thinking about it remember Jack Del Rio, when he got the Raiders job, tried to hire a defensive coordinator from college, and people said no. And part of it is guys make so much money now.
Grantham,
this guy,
right?
Yeah, who's still, I think, with Dan Mullen at Florida, who's kind of a polarizing guy, I think, in like quote-unquote SEC country, right? His
Hadn't he been at
defense
like Louisville at the time? Wasn't he?
He'd been at Louisville for Petrino, yeah. Then he went to Mississippi State, and then he went to Florida. Like, he's a highly thought of guy, but I think in the individual bubble of the Gators, they're down on him. This guy, before all this shit happened at the beginning of the season with Iowa, I think was viewed as the best strength coach in the country, right? Iowa consistently a top 15, 20 program, yet they do not get five-star guys. And all their guys, when you think Iowa, it's not like speed, it's like strength, right? They're kicking ass. So I get it from a football standpoint. But once he gets fired, I mean, basically you have to go for racial comments, and just in the times we're living in, like that just to me shows everything. I've always had a huge red flag on Urban Meyer. He is a elite coach. Like, you could argue if he could just stay a place a little bit longer, he would be every bit as Nick's equal. But he's like bounced around a little bit. He quits. But he's beaten Nick head to head multiple times. Like, he's elite. But I think he's a complete fraud, because he, unlike Belichick, doesn't pretend to be some moralist. Kyle, McVay, none of those guys do. Urban kind of has that vibe, and part of it's his college shtick. But it's like, then he hires this guy who was just fired for all these racial shit forever at Iowa. Like, come, what are we doing here? And clearly, I think I saw one of the guys, is it Wasserman, is a big college football writer for The Athletic. Is that a last name? Ari Wasserman. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, just someone had a tweet, like a guy like him, that said the big difference, Urban was used to doing whatever he wanted at Florida or Ohio State, because he didn't answer to anybody. The president,
because they had football coaches in charge in college.
They basically answered
big
to him.
Programs.
Yeah, right. Even Gene Smith at Ohio State, and what's his name at Florida when Urban left, was a really famous AD. I forget his name, when he hired our guy Jim McElwain. Remember, he showed up at his house at Colorado State. Famous AD that hired Billy Donovan too. Jeremy, Foley or something like that. Yeah. And I do wonder, when this thing got out of control, and I don't even want to say on social media, when people were just like, Fritz Pollard came out with a statement like, what are we doing here, guys? that it does feel like it wasn't Urban's like, oh, I got to do it because of peer pressure. It was like the owner's like, no,
Right.
you've got to go.
Yeah.
That's the first time. That's probably guy when all those things happened with his wide receiver coach that was like his mentor's grandson, right? Something Smith. He refused to fire him for a while. Refused to do it, and they couldn't do anything. And then it got so out of control when like she was, tweeting out the fucking text messages. He had no choice, and Ohio State, like the entire university, kind of got involved. It never happened this fast with a guy like him.
Now, he still taught a class on character and leadership after that at Ohio State, right? Didn't he do that?
I think he did it after he retired. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and Florio wrote something similar that this is a lesson that Nick Saban learned, that the NFL is very different than college in this way. Like, the owner is in charge of you, no matter how much success you have in the NFL.
Because isn't it weird in college? Like, if a college coach, let's use an even number, makes $5 million, it actually comes from various places, right?
Not an even number, but I know what you mean.
$5 million? Oh, yeah. I meant like just something.
Simple number.
10, whatever. They don't get like, whatever the direct deposit from just the school, right? It's broken down to school. Like I know the state institutions pay a couple million. Another deal pays $1 million.
You get some money from your media responsibilities. You make $250,000. Yeah.
Like Andy
Nike
Reid or Bill Belichick's $11 million just comes broken out over 12 months, I would imagine, right?
From one place.
Just complete. Yeah.
Yeah. It. Look, I think.
Why would he hire this guy of all the people he could have hired?
Because that's how he's operated. I'll do what I want, and in the end, me telling everybody, "Hey, I know the guy. He's a good guy," is going to be good enough. People will have to say, "Okay." The part of this that is so head scratching is not just. It's not just that it happened, and then I saw Florio broke it down like he got 6 or 7 straight questions in his press conference about it, to the point that the moderator for the Jags had to stop the questions. It's not just that. It's that
Chris Doyle did.
No. Urban got so many. Urban got a question and then a follow up and then a follow up and then a follow up and then a follow up, and finally like, okay, guys, we got to talk about something else, which is unusual, but. It's also
for a strength coach. I think it happens with a player.
Well, I told you
right?
when it happened, is like, if I were them, I wouldn't have announced it. If they wanted to try and get the last thing, again, they probably weren't going to quote unquote get away with it, but their only shot was to not announce it. And just like a month goes by and people realize the guy's on staff. That was their only shot to slide it by people.
And I push back. I think that backfires because
maybe it does.
It would have come out. That would have got out. This guy was too big of a polarizing figure, right?
Well, so here's my point, though, John. The only one part of the problem is trying to sneak it by everybody. The other problem is, if all the stuff about him was true, you were going to have a problem with your own players, with NFL players being coached by this guy. The college players said, we don't want to work with this guy, right? So he was taking a risk on 2 fronts. On one front, it was, I can make this hire and no one can force me to fire him. And on the other front, it's, no, this guy's going to work with NFL players and it'll be fine. It was a double risk he took on this guy.
What I had read about the guy, and I'm sure you did too, are pretty just the basic things of like, was racial comment. Like he'd be yelling at guys like, I'm going to send you back to the ghetto. You're going to go back to the ghetto,
right.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And not as much, because clearly as a performance guy, as the strength and conditioning coach of that program for, I think, basically 2 decades, and when he was fired, he was the highest paid strength and conditioning coach in the NFL or in college football, or at least one of them. It might have been the highest, actually. And I think for people that don't know, I mean, if you're a football fan, I think we all realize like the strength and conditioning coach is pretty important, right? Football is a game of strength. So that guy plays a huge role on your team. Like he's, to me, a strength and conditioning coach. If you got your head coach, your coordinators, maybe like an O-line, a D-line coach, like your strength and conditioning coach is more important than a lot of position coaches, right? Like it's easier to find a DB coach than it is a sweet strength and conditioning. So I can see where Urban just goes, this guy's elite, I'm taking him. But like he would have to know everything that happened coming to the NFL for all the positions. Like you just couldn't have had another guy lined up. Right? You couldn't have got another. I just don't. It's hard for me to comprehend. But I also comprehend it pretty easily when I go, this is Urban Meyer. He does not give a fuck.
But again, John,
my nickname for him has always been kind of Fraud Meyer because I just think he's kind of a fraudulent person.
Okay,
Great coach,
but again,
that
to me, all that applies to like the media stuff. Like, I'm just going to force this hire in and no one can stop me. But for him to not have the foresight to think, well, isn't DJ Chark going to read this article? Isn't Miles Jack going to read this article? Isn't Josh Allen going to read this article? Aren't these guys going to read these articles? Laviska
What
Shenault.
about we got all this money? What about my free agents?
What about exactly? Are they going to look at me and go, wait a second, dude, did you really just hire this guy? Like, that was potentially a problem that he never even got to, although now it kind of is a problem for him because he hired the guy. So I advocated for him to get a job. I would have really considered hiring him for any of the jobs that were out there because I think he's going to give you 5 years of building your organization, and he's going to get Trevor Lawrence, and so he's going to be set up to succeed. But
my biggest red flag on the guy from a coaching standpoint is definitely the last 2 spots, Ohio State and Florida. He was the king poobah, and like Saban, everyone answers to him. Like, everyone just, in a weird way, kisses his feet, right? I mean, you get on your knees when you're around him because he's that elite. He dominates. And at the program, there is not a player. Think about it, Alabama and Florida. And Alabama now has had, I mean, who knows? I mean, fucking 100-plus first-rounders in Saban's tenure, maybe. Maybe not 100, but probably close to 100. Florida and Ohio State had a ton. And not one player, including Tebow, or even Tua, for as big as he got, ever were as big as their head coach. Tebow might have had a moment, but it's just
Tebow was, yeah.
Yeah, Tebow was, and he's going to go down as like one of the most famous, accomplished college football athletes of all time.
Yeah,
those guys are used to everything is like cut and dry with them. I think one thing with pro football, while it's a lot about you, Belichick can have that because you walk in, he's got 6 rings, right? Tom showed up to Tampa, it was the rings. Why does DJ Chark give a shit about bro? I got more NFL experience than you do, Urban. Like, there is a balance that I do wonder. It might be a little, especially if you don't win right away. Yeah. It could be a little more difficult if he just thinks I'm dictator, because that is how he's used to operating, and it works.
Yep.
And that was always the pushback. Like Randy Mueller, who was Saban's general manager, told me it was just difficult for him to do some of the minutia of being a head coach of like, we just got to bring in this random DB, and he's just used to like a random guy doesn't just show up on Alabama's roster. Right, or LSU's roster, or Florida's roster, but in college, or Andy Reid every day, like a guy gets hurt, some random guy will be at practice. This is part of the deal.
And he didn't even watch the film, right? The GM just got him.
Yeah, put a fucking tape on his helmet that says Smith, right? It's just that I do wonder if that is going to be an element of Urban not being able to control everything and having to answer to people, players included, right? I mean, they have some juice. Trevor Lawrence is going to have a lot of juice.
Well,
now, he's such a good guy. Maybe he does get a little rocky. The other thing that people don't talk about is the division is pretty hard. Houston stinks, but Indy and Tennessee are not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Those teams are way better. So
their floors are high.
He's going to get his ass kicked probably.
Indy and Tennessee have high floors, right? Even if they're not Super Bowl contenders, you're just – yeah, it's maybe –
More than likely they lose all 4 of those games, right? Against those 2 teams.
What's more likely, Urban's the coach for 2 years or 5?
2.
Yeah. And then if Trevor Lawrence is good, it's a really attractive job. But
I do wonder.
It's just a weird situation for him to come into.
When the Chargers hired Brandon Staley, and this is not the right way to hire because you always want to get the best, but you start thinking to yourself like, who's going to be a lot easier to deal with on a daily basis? Because it's not guaranteed that Urban's going to work.
Definitely if you're an established GM, you think that. If you're Tom Telesco, you think that, right? If you're the owner, you would say the Chargers do not have a strong owner. The Jags do.
Financially, but not successfully.
No. Yeah, I just mean in terms of like the impact they have on their organization on a daily basis. Like they are just involved. Like I want to hire the best. Like that's what the Jags think, right? It's not the Chargers. It's more like Tom Telesco, do your thing.
Yeah, it would shock you if it came out like Tom Telesco and Dean Spanos got a secret meeting with Lincoln Riley, right?
Yes, it would. That the Spanos part of that would shock me. If you told me Tom Telesco wants Lincoln Riley, See,
I'm
wouldn't
saying
shock
they
me.
got a meeting. They'd be like, damn, that's like something that a big time organization would do. We don't view like Shad Khan was getting interviews with people, even if he shouldn't. Now, part of that was the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah.
But if I
Yeah.
had told you Sean or Shad had got, a 2-hour conversation, he flew or Zoomed with Lincoln Riley, you'd be like, I could see that.
Right, because he called.
Yeah.
He showed up.
Big time.
So
remember that was David Tepper's deal. He showed up at Matt Rule's house.
Right.
I would imagine the 7 years, $65 million helped, but it is powerful when you.
I brought a
guy shows up at your
housewarming
house.
gift. This check.